Welcome to HICGI News Agency.
HICGI News Agency Live. Welcome. Agency, HICGI News Agency.
This is HICGI News Agency.
News Agency. This is HICGI News Agency.
News Agency Live.
We are live. HICGI News Agency. This is HICGI News Agency. My nation, my pride. Welcome to My Nation, My Pride, and a special broadcast from HICGI News Agency. My name is Chivombi Ernest Benjamin with an honorary doctorate in humanity from Canada. It's a pleasure that we're going to be bringing you in this special coverage traversing the world to understand our countries that we come from. And probably this could inspire other people to visit us or even be part of our society. This special show, which is going to be running oftenly, is brought to you by HICGI International Group, which is a tourism travel company based on Namaswa Hill into the highway. For those of you who would like to tour these countries, we're going to be talking about, you could be interested in their food, you could be interested in their culture or festivals happening in these countries. Come on, save some money and let's go tour the world together. Now we'll be starting from right here in Namaswa, Uganda, talking about Uganda, the nation, of course, that is hosting us. We'll be moving to other countries, nation by nation. But let's see about this nation of Uganda. Uganda is a landlocked country in East Africa. It is bordered by Kenya, Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Rwanda somewhere, and of course there is Tanzania. The southern part includes a substantial portion of Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is one of the biggest freshwater bodies of the world. So Uganda is in the Great Lakes region, which lies within the Nile Basin and have a varied equatorial climate. As of 2024, it had a population of 45.9 million, of whom 1.8 million live in the capital city. The largest capital city is Kampala. Uganda is named after the Buganda Kingdom, which encompasses a large portion of the south, including Kampala, and whose language is Luganda. Widely spoken and The official language of Uganda is English. The region was populated by the people of various ethnicities before Bantu and the Nilotic groups arrived around 3,000 years ago. These new inhabitants established influential kingdoms such as the Empire of Chitara. The arrival of the Arabs and trading, that is in 1830s, and the British explorers in the late 19th century marked the beginning of foreign influence. The British established the Protectorate of Uganda in 1894, setting the stage for the culture and as well as the political future of this mighty nation of Uganda. Uganda gained independence in 1962 with Milton Obote as the first prime minister. And in 1966, there was a mango crisis as the the country marked significant conflict with the Buganda kingdom, as well as the country's conversion from a parliamentary system into a presidential system. Idi Amin Dada military coup in 1971 led to the brutal regime characterized by mass killings and economic decline until his overthrow in 1979. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni took power in 1986 after a six-year guerrilla war. While Museveni's rule resulted in instability and economic growth, political oppression and human rights abuses continued. The abolition of presidential term limits as well as allegations of electoral fraud and repression have raised concerns about Uganda's democratic future. Museveni was elected president in 2011, 2016, 2021 general elections, and recently in human rights issues, corruption, regional conflicts such as involvement in democratic wars, the struggle against Lord's resistance army NLA continue to challenge Uganda. Despite this, it has made progress in education and health, improving the literacy and reducing HIV infection through challenges in maternal health, gender, and inequality persist.
For more than 10 years, HICGI International Group has been your number one partner in tours and travel consultancy. We also do real estate, legal services, ICT services, and much more. Find us on kbinternationalgroup.com or write to us at info@kbinternationalgroup.com. You may also write to us at PO Box 35827 Kampala, Uganda, or visit us on Namaswahi off Entebbe Highway. Call us on +256 200937566 or +256 3948632 or 46, or you can send us plus on WhatsApp on +256 752 1375 66. Cab International Group, your number one rail business partner.
Geographically, Uganda is diverse with volcanic hills, mountains, and lakes, including Lake Victoria, which I just mentioned, the world's second largest freshwater lake. The country has significant natural resources, including fertile agriculture and untapped oil reserves, contributing to its economic development. This service sector dominates the economy, surpassing agriculture and Uganda's rich biodiversity with national parks and wildlife reserves attract tourism and a vital sector of the economy. Uganda is a member of the United Nations, the African Union, G77, the East African Community, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. We're gonna go to the history of this country. This show is Understand My Country or My Nation, My Identity is brought to you by HICGI International Group. Let's get a commercial break and come back.
For more than 10 years, HICGI International Group has been your number one partner in tours and travel consultancy. We also do real estate, legal services, ICT services, and much more. Find us on kbinternationalgroup.com or write to us at info@kbinternationalgroup.com. You may also write to us at PO Box 35827 Kampala, Uganda, or visit us on Namaswahi off Entebbe Highway. Call us on +256 200937566 or +256 3948632 or 46. Or you can send us a plus on WhatsApp on +256 752 1375 66. HICGI International Group, your number one rail business partner.
Much of Uganda was inhabited by the Central Sudanic and Korean-speaking farmers and herders until 3,000 years ago. When Bantu speakers arrived in the south and Nilotic speakers arrived in the northeast by 1500 AD, they all been assimilated into Bantu speaking cultures. South of Mount Elgon, the Nile River, and Lake Choga. According to the oral tradition and archaeological studies, the Empire of Chitara covered an important part of the Great Lakes area, from the north Lakes Albert and Choga to the southern Lakes Victoria and Tanganyika. Chitala is claimed as the antecedent of the Toro, Ankole, and Busoga kingdom. Samlo invaded Chitala and assimilated with the Bantu society, there establishing the Bito dynasty of the current Omukama or ruler of Bunyoro, Chitala. Arab traders moved into the land from the Indian Ocean coast of East Africa in the 1830s for trade and commerce. In the late 1860s, Bunyoro in mid-western Uganda found itself threatened from the north by the Egyptian-sponsored agents. Unlike the Arab traders from the East African coast who sought trade, these agents were promoting foreign conquest. In 1869, Khedive Ismail Pasha of Egypt, seeking to annex the territories north of the borders of Lake Victoria and east of Lake Albert and South Gondokoro, sent a British explorer, Samuel Baker, on a military expedition to the frontiers of northern Uganda with the objective of suppressing the slave trade there and opening the way to commerce and civilization. The Banyoro resisted Baker, who had to fight a desperate battle to secure his retreat. Baker regarded the resistance as an act of treachery, and he denounced the Banyoro in a book, Ismailia, a narrative of the expedition to Central Africa for the suppression of slave trade organized by Ismail Khedive of Egypt, 1874. That was widely read in Britain. Later, the British arrived in Uganda with a predisposition against the kingdom of Bunyoro and sided with the kingdom of Buganda. This eventually cost Bunyoro half of its territory, which was given to Buganda as a reward from the British. Two of the numerous lost counties were restored to Bunyoro after independence. In the 1860s, while the Arabs sought influence from the north, British explorers searching for the source of the Nile arrived in Uganda. They were followed by the British Anglican missionaries who arrived in the Kingdom of Buganda in 1877 and French Catholic missionaries in 1879. This situation gave rise to the death of the Uganda martyrs in 1885 after the conversion of Mutesa I and much of his court, and the succession of his anti-Christian son Mwanga. The British government chartered the Imperial British East African Company (IBEC) to negotiate trade agreements in the region beginning in 1888. From 1886, there was a series of religious wars in Buganda, initially between Muslims and Christians, and then from 1890 between Ba-Inglesa Protestants and Ba-França Catholics. These factions were named after the imperial powers which they were aligned. Because of the civil unrest and financial burdens, IB claimed that it was unable to maintain their occupation in the region. British commercial interests were ardent to protect the trade route of the Nile, which prompted the British government to annex Buganda and adjoining territories to create Uganda Protectorate in 1894. The Protectorate of Uganda was a protectorate of the British Empire from 1894 to 1962. In 1893, the Imperial British East African Company transferred its administration rights of territory, consisting mainly of the Kingdom of Buganda, to the British government. IBEC relinquished its control over Uganda after Ugandan internal religious wars had driven it into bankruptcy. In 1894, the Uganda Protectorate was established and the territory was extended beyond the borders of Buganda by signing more treaties with the other kingdoms, Toro in 1900, Ankole in 1901, and Bunyoro in 1933, to an area that roughly corresponds to that of present-day Uganda. The status of the protectorate meant that Uganda retained a degree of self-government that would have otherwise been limited under a full colonial administration compared to neighboring Kenya, which had been made a colony. In 1890s, 32,000 laborers from the British India were recruited to East Africa under in the child labor contracts to construct the Uganda area. Most of the surviving Indians returned home, but 6,724 decided to remain in East Africa after the lines were completion. Subsequently, some became traders and took control of cotton ginning and sartorial retail. From 1900 to 1920, a sleeping sickness epidemic in the southern part of Uganda along the north shores of Lake Victoria killed more than 250,000 people. World War II encouraged the colonial administration of Uganda to recruit 77,143 soldiers to serve in the King's African Rifles. They were seen in action in the Western Desert Campaign, the Abyssinian Campaign, the Battle of Madagascar, and the Burma Campaign. The independence of 1960 to 1965. Uganda gained independence from the UK on 9th October 1962 with Queen Elizabeth II as head of the state and Queen of Uganda. In October 1963, Uganda became a republic but maintained its membership in the Commonwealth of Nations. The first post-independence election held in 1962 was won by an alliance between the Uganda People's Congress (UPC) and the Kabaka KY. UPC and KY formed the first post-independence government with Milton Obote as an executive prime minister, with Buganda Kabaka, who was the king, Edward Mutesa, to holding the largely ceremonial position of president. Buganda crisis of 1962-19 66. Uganda's immediate post-independence years were dominated by relationship between the central government and the largest regional kingdom of Buganda. The issue of how to manage the largest monarchy within the framework of a unitary state had been a problem since the British creation of the Protectorate of Uganda. Colonial governors had failed to come up with a formula that worked. This was further complicated by Buganda's nonchalant attitude to its relationship with the central government. Buganda never sought independence, but rather appeared to be comfortable with a loose arrangement that guaranteed them privileges above the other subjects within the protectorate or a special status when the British left. This was evidenced in part by hostilities between the British colonial authorities and Buganda prior to independence. Within Buganda, there were divisions between those who wanted the Kabaka to remain a dominant monarch and those who wanted to join with the rest of Uganda to create a modern secular state. The split resulted in the creation of two dominant Buganda-based parties, the Kabaka Eka, Kabaka Only, KY, and the Democratic Party DP, that had roots in the Catholic Church. The bitterness between these two parties was extremely intense, especially as the first elections for the post-colonial Parliament approached. The Kabaka particularly disliked the DP leader Benedicto Chiwanuka. Outside a soft-spoken politician from northern Uganda, Milton Obote had forged an alliance of non-Buganda politicians to form the Uganda People's Congress UPC. The UPC at its heart was dominated by politicians who wanted to rectify what they saw as the regional inequality that favored Buganda's special status. This drew in substantial support from outside Buganda. The party, however, remained a loose alliance of interests, but Obote showed great skill at negotiating them into a common ground based on federal formula. At independence, the Buganda question remained unresolved. Uganda was one of the few colonial territories that achieved independence without a dominant political party with a clear majority in parliament. In the pre-independence elections, the UPC ran no candidates in Buganda and won 37 of the 61 directly elected seats outside Buganda. The DP won 24 seats outside Buganda. The special status granted to Buganda meant that the 21 Buganda seats were elected by proportional representation reflecting elections to the Buganda parliament. The Luchiko KY won a resounding victory over DP, winning all the 21 seats. The UPC reached a peak at the end of 1964 when the leader of the DP in parliament, Basil Chiza Batariganya, crossed the parliamentary floor with 5 other MPs, leaving DP with only 9 seats. The DP MPs were not particularly happy that the hostility of their leader Benedicto Chiwanuka towards the Kabaka was hindering their chances of compromise with KY. The trickle of defections turned into flood when 10 KY members crossed the floor when they realized that the former coalition with the UPC was no longer viable. Obote's charismatic speeches across the country were sweeping all before him, and the UPC was winning almost every local election held and increasing its control over all the district councils and legislatures outside Uganda. The response from the Kabaka was mute, probably content in his ceremonial role and symbolism in his part of the country. However, there were also major divisions within the palace that made it difficult for him to act effectively against, of course, this. There were also, however, problems brewing inside the UPC as its ranks swelled. Ethnic, religious, regional, and personal interests began to shake the party. The party's apparent strength was eroded in a complex sequence of factional conflicts in its central and regional structures, and by 1966, the UPC was tearing itself apart. The conflicts were further intensified by the newcomers who had crossed the parliamentary floor from DP and KY. UPC delegates arrived in Gulu in 1964 for their delegates conference. There was the first demonstration as to how Obote was losing control of his party. The battle over the secretary general of the party was a bitter contest between the new moderates candidate Grace Ibingira and the radical John Konge. Ibinjira subsequently became the symbol of the opposition to Obote within the UPC. This is an important factor when looking at the subsequent events that led to the crisis between Buganda and the central government. For those outside the UPC, including KY supporters, this was a sign that Obote was vulnerable. Keen observers realized that the UPC was not a cohesive unit. The collapse of the UPC-KY alliance openly revealed the dissatisfaction Obote and others had about Buganda's special status. In 1964, the government responded to demands from some parts of the vast Buganda kingdom that they were not the Kabaka's subjects. Prior to colonial rule, Buganda had been rivaled by the neighboring Bunyoro kingdom. Buganda had conquered parts of Bunyoro, and the British colonialists had formalized this in the Buganda agreements known as the Lost Counties. The people in these areas wished to revert to being part of the Bunyoro. Obote decided to allow a referendum which angered the Kabaka and most of the rest of Buganda. The residents of the counties voted to return to Bunyoro despite the Kabaka's attempts to influence the vote. Having lost the referendum, KY opposed the bill to pass the counties of Bunyoro, thus ending the alliance with UPC. The UPC, which had previously been a national party, began to break along tribal lines with when Ibinjira challenged Obote in the UPC. The north-south ethnic divide that had been evident in the economic and social spheres now entrenched itself in politics. Obote surrounded himself with mainly northern politicians, while Ibinjira's supporters, who were subsequently arrested and jailed with him, were mainly from the south. In time, the two factions acquired ethnic labels: Bantu, the mainly southern Ibinjira faction, and Nilotic, the mainly northern Obote faction. The perception that the government was at war with the Bantu was further enhanced when Obote arrested and imprisoned the mainly Bantu ministers who backed Ibinjira. These labels brought into the mix two very powerful influences. First, Buganda, the people of Buganda, and Bantu, therefore, naturally aligned to Ibinjira faction. The Ibinjira faction further advanced this alliance by accusing Obote of wanting to overthrow the Kabaka. They were now aligned to opposing Obote. Second, the security forces the British colonialists had recruited the army and police almost exclusively from northern Uganda due to their perceived suitability for those roles at independence. The army and the police was dominated by northern tribes, mainly Nilotic. They would now feel more affiliated to Obote, and he took full advantage of this to consolidate his power. In April 1966, Obote passed out 800 new army recruits at Moroto, of whom 70% came from the northern region. At the time, there was a tendency to perceive central government and security forces as dominated by northerners, particularly the Acholi, though who through the UPC had significant access to government positions at the national level. In northern Uganda, there were also varied degrees of anti-Buganda feelings, particularly over the kingdom's special status before and after independence, and all the economic and social benefits that came with the status. Obote brought significant numbers of northerners into the central state, both through the civil service and military, and created a patronage machine in northern Uganda. However, both Bantu and Nilotic labels represent the Bantu category, for example, includes both Buganda and Bunyoro, historically bitter rivals. The Nilotic label includes the Lugbara, Acholi, and Nangi, all of whom have bitter rivals that were to define Uganda's military politics later. Despite these ambiguities, these events unwittingly brought to fore the northern-southern political divide, which to some extent still influences Uganda politics. The UPC fragmentation continued as opponents sensed Obote's vulnerability. At local level, where the UPC dominated most councils, this content began to challenge incumbent council leaders. Even in Obote's home district, attempts were made to oust the head of the local district council in 1966. A more worrying fact for the UPC was that the next national elections loomed in 1967, and without the support of KY, who were now likely to back DP, the growing factions in the UPC, there was the real possibility that the UPC would be out of power in months. Obote went after KY with a new Act of Parliament in early 1966 that blocked any attempt by KY to expand outside Buganda. KY appeared to respond in Parliament through one of their few remaining MPs, the terminally Il Daudi Ocheng. Ocheng was an irony. Although from northern Uganda, he had risen high ranks in the ranks of KY and become a close confidant to the Kabaka, who had gifted him with large land titles in Buganda. In Obote's absence from Parliament, Ocheng laid bare the illegal plundering of ivory and gold from the Congo that had been orchestrated by Obote's army chief of staff, Colonel Idi Amin. He further alleged that Obote, Onana, and Nakon had all benefited from the scheme. Parliament overwhelmingly voted in favor of the motion to censure Amin and investigate Obote's involvement. This shook the government and raised tensions in the country. KY further demonstrated its ability to challenge Obote from within his party at the UPC Buganda conference, where the Attorney General Godfrey Binaisa was hosted by a faction believed to have the backing of KY, Ibingira, and other anti-Obote elements in Buganda. Obote's response was to arrest Ibingira and other ministers at a cabinet meeting and to assume special powers in February 1966. In March 1966, Obote also announced that the offices of president and vice president would cease to exist, effectively dismissing the Kabaka. Obote also gave Amin more power, giving him the army commander position over the previous holder, Oporot, who had relations to Buganda through marriage, possibly believing Oporot would be reluctant to take military action against the Kabaka if it came to that. Obote abolished the constitution and effectively suspended elections. In a few months, Obote went on television and radio to accuse the Kabaka of various offenses, including requesting foreign troops, which appears to have been explored by the Kabaka following the rumors of Amin plotting a coup. Obote further dismantled the authority of the Kabaka by announcing, among other measures, the abolition of the independent public service commissions for federal units. This removed the Kabaka's authority to appoint civil servants in Buganda. The abolition of Buganda High Court, removing any judicial authority the Kabaka had. Abolition of lands for Buganda chiefs. Land is one of the key sources of Kabaka's power over his subjects. This set the stage for a conflict between Buganda and the central government. Within Buganda's political institutions, rivalries driven by religion and personal ambition made the institutions ineffective and unable to respond to the central government moves. The Kabaka was often regarded as aloof and unresponsive to advice from the young Buganda politicians, who better understood the new post-independence politics, unlike the traditionalists who were ambivalent to what was going on as long as the traditional benefits were maintained. The Kabaka favored the neo-traditionalists. In May 1966, the Kabaka asked for foreign help, and the Buganda parliament demanded that the Uganda government leave Buganda, including the capital, Kampala. In response, Obote ordered Idi Amin to attack the Kabaka's palace. The battle for the Kabaka's palace was fierce, the Kabaka's guards putting up more resistance than had been expected. The British trained Captain the Kabaka with about 120 armed men kept Idi Amin at bay for 12 hours. It is estimated that up to 2,000 people died in the battle, which ended when the army called in heavier guns and overran the palace. The anticipated countryside uprising in Uganda did not materialize, and a few hours later a beaming Obote met the press to reach his victory. The Kabaka escaped over the palace walls and was transported into exile in London by supporters. He died there 3 years later. Before the coup in 1966-1971, in 1966, following a power struggle between Obote-led government and King Mutesa, Obote suspended the constitution and removed the ceremonial president and vice president. In 1967, a new constitution proclaimed Uganda a republic and abolished the traditional kingdoms. Obote was declared the president. Idi Amin's regime in 1971 to 1979. After a military coup on 25th January 1971, Obote was deposed from power and General Idi Amin seized the control of the country. Amin ruled Uganda as a dictator with the support of the military for the next 8 years. He carried out mass killings within the country to maintain his rule. An estimated 80,000 to 500,000 Ugandans died during his regime. Aside from his brutalities, he forcibly removed the entrepreneur Indian minority from Uganda. In June 1976, Palestinian terrorists hijacked an Air France flight and forced it to land at Entebbe Airport. 100 of the 250 passengers originally on board were held hostage until an Israeli commando raid rescued them 10 days later. Amin's reign was ended after the Uganda-Tanzania War in 1979, which Tanzania forces aided by Ugandan exiles invaded Uganda. 1979 to present. In 1980, the Ugandan Bush War broke out, leading Yoweri Kaguta Museveni becoming president, and his forces toppled the previous regime in January 1986. Political parties in Uganda were restricted in their activities beginning that year in a measure ostensibly designed to reduce sectarian violence in the non-party movement. System instituted by Museveni political parties continued to exist, but they would operate only a headquarters office. They could not open branches, hold rallies, or field candidates directly. Although electoral candidates could belong to political parties, a constitutional referendum cancelled this 19-year ban on multi-party politics in July 2005. In 1993, Pope John Paul II visited Uganda during his 6-day pastoral trip to urge Ugandans to seek reconciliation. In mid-late 1990s, Museveni was lauded by Western countries as part of a new generation of African leaders.
For more than 10 years, HICGI International Group has been your #1 partner in tours and travel consultancy. We also do real estate, legal services, ICT services, and much more. Find us on HICGIinternationalgroup.com or write to us at info@HICGIinternationalgroup.com. You may also write to us at PO Box 35827 Kampala, Uganda, or visit us on Namaswa Hill off Entebbe Highway. Call us on +256 200937566 or +256 3948632 or 46. Or you can send us a plus on WhatsApp on +256 752 1375 66. HICGI International Group, your #1 real business partner.
His presidency has been marred, however, by invading and occupying the Democratic Republic of Congo during the Second Congo War, resulting in an estimated 5.4 million deaths since 1996, and by participating in other conflicts in the Great Lakes region. of Africa. That is a questionable issue and next to a discussion if indeed the Congo problems are attributed to Museveni. He has, however, struggled for years in the civil war against the Lord's Resistance Army, which has been guilty of numerous crimes against humanity, including child slavery, the Atiak massacre, and other mass murders. Conflict in northern Uganda that has killed thousands and displaced millions. Parliament abolished presidential term limits in 2005. Allegedly, Museveni used public funds to pay $2,000 to each member of parliament who supported the measure. Presidential elections were held in February 2006. Museveni ran against several candidates, and the most prominent of them being Kizza Besigye. The money cannot be confirmed. On 20 February 2011, the Uganda Electoral Commission declared Museveni the winning candidate of 2011 elections that were held on 18 February 2011. The opposition, however, was not satisfied with the results, condemning them as full of sham and rigging. According to the officials' results, Museveni won with 68% of the votes. This easily topped his nearest challenger, Besigye, who had been Museveni's physician, and told reporters that he and his supporters downrightly snubbed the outcome as well as the unremitting rule of Museveni or any person he may appoint. Besigye added that the rigged elections would definitely lead to an illegitimate leadership and that it is up to the Ugandans to critically analyze this. The European Union's Election Observation Mission reported on improvements and flaws of the Ugandan electoral process. The electoral campaign and the polling day were conducted in a peaceful manner. However, the electoral process was marred by avoidable administrative and logistical failures that led to an unacceptable number of Ugandan citizens being disenfranchised. Since August 2012, activist group Anonymous has threatened Ugandan officials and hacked official government websites over its anti-gay bills. Some international donors have threatened to cut financial aid to the country if the anti-gay bills continue. Indicators of a plan for succession by the president's son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, have increased tensions. Museveni has ruled the country since 1986 and he was last re-elected in January. Star-turned politician Bobi Wine had 35%. The opposition challenged the results because of the allegations of widespread fraud and irregularities. Another opposition candidate was 24-year-old John Katumba. Just to correct, the recent elections have been 2026 recently in January, where Museveni has won at 71.6%, if I'm not mistaken. We will go to the geography of Uganda in our next series. This is Dr. Chivumbi Ernest Benjamin with an honorary doctorate. Thank you so much for watching this episode of this special show that we've just launched today. My Nation, My Pride, brought to you by Cable International. That has been Uganda as we continue to traverse. On the camera today has been Nahawe Valeria. Until next time, my name is Chivumbi Ernest Benjamin.